Welcome back to Mastering Thought. I'm here with Mark Waller and I'm Christina Black. Hey, Mark.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm excited for today's episode.
Great. What
How
is
are you?
today's episode, for heaven's sake?
I don't know. I have some sort of attachment things I'd like to learn. Do you know anything about attachment theory?
It's really I know enough about it. I studied a lot, but what really is weird about that is I had a client not too long ago, and we're having this conversation, and all of a sudden she starts talking about attachment theory, and
Mm-hmm.
like, where did that come from? She says, "Oh, this is really hot on TikTok." Did you know it's hot on TikTok? I had no idea.
No, I didn't. But I have been hearing more about it and it's been coming into my life. Yeah, even this week, it just started coming into my life more.
How was that? How did it come in your life?
Well, as we were talking about some of the things we wanted to talk about today, just that got ushered in. I need to read up on that. And then I actually had a therapy session this week where my therapist was talking about some of my things I brought up that might have to do with attachment. And so, yeah, it's been a fun week diving into it and learning about it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's kind of weird the way it just sort of presented itself all of a sudden. Because when I wrote the book, The Dance of the Lion and the Unicorn, I studied it
Mm-hmm.
extensively, but
Mm-hmm.
good grief, that was 20 years ago. So I had no idea
Mm-hmm.
people were rediscovering this. And then
Mm-hmm.
I was on Twitter, which is now X, the other day, and I saw somebody who was doing a post who is an attachment specialist. So
Okay.
it's very much in vogue, I guess. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to title today's episode "Beyond Attachment" because I want to show how attachment fits into a bigger picture.
Hmm.
And first of all, let's define attachment. Attachment is the quality of the relationship between usually a mother and a baby during the first 3 years.
Hmm.
And I'll explain that in a few minutes. But I want to set the stage by showing you a little video that I show all my clients that just completely blows them away
Mm-hmm.
to lead into this whole thing. So let's take a look at this video.
Yeah.
Does your relationship look like this? Two people, two circles. The one on the right I call the lion, and the one on the left I call a unicorn. Now, we all have emotional pain, and lion's emotional pain is a feeling of nobody cares or they're not good enough. It's a sense of rejection. The unicorn's emotional pain is fear or anxiety. Now, we all need a defense against our pain because we don't want to feel our pain. A unicorn's defense is they avoid. They don't like conflict. A lion's defense when they feel rejected is anger. Now, this is circular. I can start anywhere. I'm just going to start here. So when the lion gets angry, the unicorn says, "Oh no, here we go again. I need to avoid the conflict." That avoidance looks like rejection, like nobody cares, and it just goes around and around like that. This is what I call the dance of the lion and the unicorn. For more information and an in-depth look, check out my book, The Dance of the Lion and the Unicorn. Okay, so what was your impression the first time you saw that?
So many light bulbs went off. Like, oh, we're not only doing this wrong. We just have different roles. And now, when I understand you and you understand me, even if we don't talk to each other perfectly, we can bridge the gap.
So that's really interesting because for so many years I've had couples. I do couples counseling, and one of the first things I do is show them that video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's jaw dropping because they know they're locked in this cycle, but they've never had it explained to them so they could see it before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so any other comments or questions about that before we move back to attachment?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I'll come up with them later if they're there.
all right. So let's go back to attachment now because you're going to see this all ties in. So here's attachment. Now originally you can see on the left-hand side over here that it was measured in children. And this comes from a researcher by the name of John Bowlby, who developed attachment theory. But to me, the more interesting part is the work of Mary Ainsworth, and I think this is back in the 80s. And they did this thing called the strange situation. Okay, so what was the strange situation? They had a room, full of children and mothers and so forth, and then a mother would bring the child into the room. And of course, that's a strange situation for a child, a new group of people, a strange place. Mm-hmm. And then the mother would leave the child and then leave the room. And they would observe the child's behavior. And then sometime later, the mother would come back and they would observe the child's behavior on the mother's return. And they observed 4 different sets of behaviors. The first they termed secure. And what that was the mother became a secure base for the baby to explore the room and to see other things. When the mother left the room, the baby was not happy, a little confused, but they would adjust, after a few minutes. And then eventually the mother would return, and then there was a happy reunion. The anxious, preoccupied children, when the mother left the room, they went into a crisis. It's like, oh my God, what's happening here? And then when the mother came back into the room, they were just frantic to get back to the mother. The avoidant children, they didn't seem to care. When the mother left, they hardly even noticed it. When the mother came back, they hardly even noticed it. Mm-hmm. And there's several descriptors for this one I call ambivalent. Basically what this meant was when the mother left the room, the baby didn't like it. When the mother came back into the room, the baby would joyfully leap into the mother's arms and then angrily push her away. So there was this ambivalent response. Mm-hmm. So that became the basis for attachment theory and attachment styles. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, then they began to measure attachment in adults, and what happened was they dropped the ambivalent category because it just wasn't showing up anymore. So in adults, the research shows 3 different categories: secured, preoccupied, and avoidant. Now I want you to look at those categories and see if you see something kind of wrong with that.
I mean, when I've looked at attachment theory things, these are the 3 that are mentioned in adults.
Right. But do you notice here that preoccupied and avoidant are styles of attachment? Secure is a quality of attachment. So there's something going on here that I don't think, the researchers are not seeing, and I'm going to show you what I see here.
Yeah.
So,
let's tease that out.
So this is what I did. What I did is assume there are only 2 attachment styles, preoccupied and avoidant, and then the quality of the attachment is whether it's secure or insecure.
Okay.
So in other words, secure attachment is not some third style of attachment. It is a quality of either avoidance or preoccupation.
Interesting, yeah.
So, and let me define preoccupied, because I was discussing this the other day with somebody and they weren't sure what that meant. What it means is the person is thinking about the relationship continuously. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to avoidant, who may be thinking about it continuously, but their thought is, I want to avoid this contact. Mm-hmm. Now, you notice that I just arbitrarily created a continuum from 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's interesting about this is, let's say on the continuum you're a 5 and you're preoccupied. So what you're going to go out and do is you're going to find somebody who is avoidant as a 5, and you're going to get married to them. So opposites attract. Okay? So that's my take on attachment. So you are either avoidant or preoccupied, and whether or not you're insecure is another discussion.
Okay.
So even secure people are avoidant and preoccupied. It's just a matter of degree.
That makes sense.
Okay? Yeah, I don't think secure is a category of attachment, it's a quality of attachment. Okay, so let me pause just a second. How are we doing so far?
I'm thinking about how you brought up lion and unicorn and this.
Uh-huh. You're starting to see it, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So just trying to draw the lines as far as it seems like anxious would maybe be lion and that are preoccupied, and that avoidant would maybe be unicorn.
Excellent. Okay,
Okay.
now this gets even more interesting.
Okay.
So about the same time, there were other researchers working on something entirely different. And what they did, and I think this was back also in the 80s. So let's see, where are we? What they did is they would show infants scary faces. And what they observed was when they showed the infant a scary face, about half of them would approach the pictures. The other half would withdraw from the pictures. And what approach withdrawal is the basic tendencies of individuals in response to stimuli in any given context. So what that means is wherever we are and our central nervous system is somehow stimulated, we respond by either approach or withdrawal. But again, notice this two-dimensional categorization again. Sounds a lot like this, doesn't it? Okay, so now then they took it one step further. So they thought, okay, well, this is very interesting. What is happening in the brains of these children that are being shown the scary faces? Well, what they found was the approachers were lighting up the left prefrontal area of the brain, which actually specializes in approach strategies. It's about curiosity and things like that. The withdrawers were lighting up the right prefrontal area, which specializes in getting away, escaping. Now, if you were in neuroscience, you'd probably say I've got an awfully simplistic view of this, but the other the
We're
other thing
not,
you
so
might
don't worry.
so the other thing about this is you might think of this in terms of predators versus prey. So we're all animals,
Yeah.
and we have to have predator strategies and prey strategies, and so that also explains this EEG asymmetry. So
That is so
literally,
amazing.
literally, approachers and withdrawers have different brains. Literally. And
That's
where
so
this comes
wild.
from, huh?
It's so wild.
It is wild. And where this comes from is when the baby is inside the mother during gestation, at some point, I can't remember, it's in my book, I think it's about 4 or 5 months, at some point, there's a switch that's thrown, and people respond differently to norepinephrine and adrenaline in the brain. And this switch determines whether you're an approacher or a withdrawer.
Wow. And those would be
Okay.
hormones? Or what?
Uh,
I don't even know.
norepinephrine,
What is epinephrine?
norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter,
Okay.
and adrenaline is a stimulant.
Right.
And so the brain's response to those is different between different people. So there's a category of people that respond one way and a category that responds the other way, and it determines whether you're an approacher or a withdrawer.
Wow.
But it all points to one thing. and we'll get to that later. So this is all in my book, The Dance of the Lion and the Unicorn. But then, as I'm writing this, there's new research being done, and it's called demand withdrawal. So now, demand withdrawal, catch me if I'm going too fast here.
I'm keeping up right now.
Okay, good. So, because I don't want to get too far in the weeds and make people think, oh, this is all just brain stuff and who cares. So, demand withdrawal was originally categorized back in the 60s, and a very famous therapist back in the 60s wrote a little bit about it, and then it was again highlighted in the 80s, and finally in the 90s, researchers caught on that there was really this pattern and they should research it. And so let's look at the pattern. So here's the demand withdrawal pattern. It was originally referred to as the nag withdrawal pattern, which is probably uncomplimentary. Now, it's really important that people looking at this understand that this does not track gender. These relationships, these roles can be flipped from one couple to another. So the demand withdrawal pattern is the woman or the man tries to start a discussion while the man tries to avoid the discussion. The woman nags and demands while the man tries to avoid the discussion. The woman nags and demands while the man withdraws, becomes silent, or refuses to discuss the matter further, and the woman criticizes while the man defends him or herself. Now, since they caught on to this, there have been dozens of studies on this pattern from the 1990s, which was not that long ago when you think about it, to current analyses on marital satisfaction, with huge implications for communication and couples counseling. Okay, so let's regroup here and summarize what we've done here. So we've got attachment, approach withdrawal, EEG asymmetry, flight versus fight. I didn't put this down, but predators versus prey, and demand withdrawal. So in your mind, Christina, what do all of these point to? What do they all have in common?
The lion and the unicorn.
Absolutely. It's the same pattern, just different. It's different facets of the same pattern over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah.
And so you remember. Go ahead, I cut you off.
That's okay. Oh, I was just thinking, from previous episodes, we know we can start to observe our thoughts when we get caught in patterns, but I'm curious to see if there's other things you want to add to that, or.
No, there's no other things I want to add to it. Today my goal was just to really establish this pattern. Now, this pattern is not just in couples. So if you're a lion, you're experiencing this pattern in other areas of your life.
I was just going to see about that. Okay.
And if you're a unicorn, you're experiencing this pattern in other areas of your life as well.
Yeah.
And notice how for unicorns, this ties to anxiety, and for lions, it ties to anger. So those occur outside of couples as well. Go ahead.
Right. Shoot, I maybe lost it, but I was going to say, like, in previous episodes, we were more talking about particular, like, your life partner, or, whichever person you hitch your life to. But this and the other categories have to do with just how you are as a person. And then that carries on to all relationships or however you interact with people. Right?
It does. But remember, I think we mentioned before that the closer emotionally you are to somebody, like in a committed relationship, as opposed to somebody at work or a friend, the more your limbic system tries to identify the other person as the parent where all the issues came from.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you know, you and I are friends. We may go have coffee, and we never experience any of these things. But
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you walk in the door with your husband, and in your relationship, boom, it all of a sudden emerges. There it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the reason is our perception of the framework we're in changes.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm not forgetting that in another episode we need to tackle the very thing you brought up at the very beginning, which is how do we solve this problem?
Mm-hmm.
But in order to solve it, you need to see what the problem is.
Sure. Yeah. The
And
pothole.
and so yeah, exactly. And so we've laid the
Mm-hmm.
groundwork now for this pattern that emerges in a relationship. And attachment and approach withdrawal and all these other things are just different ways of looking at basically the same thing, which is the dance of the lion and the unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you want to say in wrapping up this, where this takes your mind to the next step?
Well, I do want to say that it seems as though, like you were saying, opposites attract. You said that, but um, it seems like sometimes that happens with friendships as well. I notice,
Mm-hmm.
like, as I get nearer to people, then my tendency starts to kind of magnify, and I'm more aware
Right.
of which attachment style I have.
Right.
And yeah, I guess I just think that's so interesting. And if I find an opposite, if I find an avoider, and I'm more of the anxious kind, that we play off of each other. And then I spend a little bit more time being like, I didn't do anything wrong, but I feel like they're avoiding me. Are they rejecting me? Was I too much? Like, I
E-
just start
exactly.
going through this spiral. And
Exactly.
like, I just think that's so odd that someone who I enjoy so much, that I didn't do anything wrong to, my brain immediately goes, how did you screw it up? What did you do? and
Right.
really nothing's wrong. They just had a busy week, you know?
Right. And I think in the future, what we're going to do is we're going to have guests on and we're going to talk about this from their perspective. And we're going to see that what you just described is universal among lions. For instance,
Mm,
if I send you a text and you don't respond, I mean, you could have been run over by a truck, but I'm gonna be in my head saying, why isn't she not responding? Doesn't she like me anymore? And of course,
mm-hmm.
unicorns have their own script that they go to as well.
Mm-hmm.
and and so we're going to explore all that with guests and between the two of us until we really flesh
Mm-hmm.
this out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That sounds great.
All right, until we meet again.
All right, sayonara.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.